All right. So Megan and I are hanging out in the Zooms. We are getting ready to have a conversation about our letters principle for communication in online teaching. And I just want to share just a little bit before we get going. These are recorded sessions. We're going to release them as a recording you may be watching or you may be listening to. But we really want these to be interactive discussions. So even if you're listening later, there's going to be a Google Doc. Hey, we just had Shelli join us. Yay! Hello, Shelli.
How are you all?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
Cool. So we're just getting started. And I was sharing that, you know, these will be sessions that can be listened to later, and we have a Google Doc set up for folks to interact with. We're going to build time into this session. So Megan, Shelli, and I will take like a good 20 minutes to fill in a part of this Google Doc, share some ideas that way. And folks listening or watching later, if you do this as well, that, you know, sort of achieves our goal of being a collaborative community. It also allows you to be eligible to claim remuneration, right? So watching and listening, you can claim flex, but if you actively engage and contribute, you can claim remuneration. So that's gonna be true for all of us here right now, and then folks who engage later, okay? So last thing I'll say before we open it up, oh, someone else joined us. John's here, woohoo! Hey, John.
Hey, I just jumped over from another meeting, so sorry I'm a little late.
No problem, no problem. We're just getting started, so you're perfect timing.
Okay, awesome.
Cool.
Awesome.
So these meetings and these conversations are really a sustained look at our principle for communication in online teaching. So this is our in-house letters defined principle for communication. I'm going to share the link in the chat for folks in the space. Here it comes. And then for folks listening or watching later, I'm just going to read it, some relevant sections. So today, so the language that we have for our principle is, and this is not all of it, just sort of what I've pulled out. Create an original and regularly updated course in Canvas that reflects a working knowledge of online course design principles and digital communication strategies. So what we're about to talk about, we want to keep in mind that kind of the base of our communication is around Canvas. So that's something to kind of problematize and think about. Another sort of irrelevant language is know when and why to employ certain online teaching strategies to best serve students' rights and needs. Okay. And then one third sort of relevant passage from this principle is open spaces. That is like to open up. So open up spaces in which students can ask questions of the instructor and of each other, okay? So this is the second conversation we're having about this principle. Last time we looked at the weekly announcement as a site of communication. And in this discussion, we're gonna look at third spaces. So by third spaces, we mean could be office hours, could be chat forums, could be the front door in front of the classroom where students congregate, anything that's non-assessed, and we'll kind of get into the definition of this. Third spaces where students can lead, self-advocate, and feel like they belong to a community of readers and writers, okay? And so last thing I'll say, and then we'll just dive into the conversation. The format for this discussion is to have about 30 minutes of just framing discussion. So what are these third spaces? What characterizes them? What do they afford to us as teachers? What do they afford to students as learners? We'll then take about 20 minutes or so of just hands-on application. So we'll kind of be quiet. We'll stop, we'll pause the recording. We'll just do some work. And then we'll come back in a final 20 minutes to just open the discussion up and maybe do some problematizing or some more weeds work at that point, okay? So let's dive in. I'm gonna share with you all here a Google Doc. And then I'm gonna not put this on the screen because I think it's better to, well, yeah, I think it's better for us just to look at each other. So let's do it that way. And then if you're watching this later, there's going to be a link to this Google Doc, so you can kind of scroll down and check it out. And if you're listening, definitely same thing. So Megan and I, so where we are, so John and Shelli in this Google Doc, I'm looking at page 2. So the page where it says, what are available open third spaces? Are you able to get there? Any questions, or did that open up for you?
Yeah.
Good. Shelli, is that perfect? Cool. So Megan and I met and we kind of hashed out just some kind of initial ideas about what third spaces are. I'll let Megan take over and start kind of leading us through some of these. But Megan and I would really love, John and Shelli, if you jump in also. So if you want to like me too, I want to say something, let's do that, right? Let's make this collaborative and an open discussion, not just a Megan and I show, okay? All right, Megan, you want to start us off? What are third spaces? What are their purposes, their affordances? Where do you want to take us?
Sure, absolutely. So Curry and I were thinking about various kind of concepts within these third spaces and then how they can be assessed and the tools that you can use to kind of assess them. So one of the first ones was thinking about a third space as a non-college space. So I think a lot of the time, as instructors, we get kind of locked in with, Canvas, Surf, our classrooms, and thinking about, these third spaces as kind of not so much instructional spaces, but open kind of forum, plaza spaces for students to convene, to gather with you, to chat about class, to chat about school, life. And it's not necessarily an assessed space, although it could be, nor is it necessarily outcomes driven. But again, it's more of this way to, as Curry's been pointing out, build community. And so I've really been using Discord, which is a free software program that anyone can download and use. And in Discord, you can @everybody if you want to essentially send a message to everyone, or you can @ to a specific person to direct a message towards them. And you can also set up different servers and channels in order to kind of have different functions and purposes. So if you want to have, for example, a server for your class and then a channel where people can come chat about an assignment, or a channel that's just for general random discussion. So you can use these third spaces in a variety of different ways to, serve different subjects and purposes. Curry, I didn't know if there was anything that you wanted to add to that.
No, that's good. That's good. I know that for the first 3 here, a lot of these related to how you're using Discord, and you had some screenshots that kind of go along with it. Is there any concrete stuff you want to point out that sort of supports what you're,
So I set up, so if you look later, for everyone looking at the document, at the screen caps, which are on the third page, there's a couple of screenshots just to kind of show some of these various ideas. And if you scroll down to, I actually don't know if I included one with actually you can see it on the setup FAQs and guidelines. So that is on, what page is that? 4.
Yep.
So you can see that there are certain people being kind of called to the chat. And anytime that happens, it pings them and gets their attention and shows that there's a message waiting for them. So within the actual servers themselves, you can kind of call to attention anybody that you'd like to. If you scroll up, though, to page 3, this is kind of what I was talking about with setting up various channels. So on page 3, I have a screen cap of one of my Discords, and all the students gave me permission for this one to share this. And I have various text channels. So there's like a general class chat, a memes and random stuff, music recommendations, share your arts and crafts. So you can set up text channels. You can also set up voice channels where students can enter the channel and just talk with their microphones and share ideas that way. So if you want to create, different channels for different purposes, students have the option to, share their artwork or collaborate on an assignment. Really whatever you want to use those channels for, and you can set up as many of them as you'd like. Students can specifically reply to other students, again, using that @ symbol to notify a specific person. And they can kind of have side conversations that way if they want to stay on topic, or they can just reply to everybody in general. And it really fosters student interactions.
Mhm. Cool. So, and what we're looking at here, I see, so like little icons, different images, like profile pictures next to names. And then if I scroll down to the lower page 4, at Vin with a little fire emoji, at Enforcer of Fun. So are those students' names?
Yeah, so it's Discord's really nice. It gives students a lot of personalization. So students can change their nicknames in the class by right-clicking their name, and so it's kind of also nice for you as the instructor if you want to, you know, if you have, like, for example, your gamer tag or whatever as your Discord, you can change your name to be your actual name. And yeah, so they can customize their names, they can customize their profile pictures. So there's a lot of buy-in points of entry, which is our second purpose and affordance. It's a comfortable space, it's a community building space, right? They can share their common interests, especially again by kind of creating those channels where it's like, hey, share, you know, anything you're working on that's creative at the moment. And they can direct message each other too, which is something that's important to point out.
And so for a lot of students who are already using Discord, this is a space that they know how to express themselves and really use all the tools. It doesn't become a new thing we're asking them to learn. And so good. I want to come back to that because there's some things to nudge about, like, well, okay, well, who all joins and how active is everybody? But maybe we'll lay out the table a little more before we get into some of the problems. Megen, how often are you seeing like relevant class discussion unfold, and how often is it just sort of like relational community expression kind of emerging? And what does that look like when it is like relevant class discussion?
There's a pretty good balance, actually. As far as the total, like, big class, you know, channels where everybody can talk to each other, like the general class chat that I have on the third page. Usually if you set up channels for specific purposes, students will, you know, use those channels for the purposes that you've mentioned, and you can add descriptions to each channel too. I would say it's a really nice balance most of the time. Not every class, I guess an important disclaimer essentially would be, not every class uses Discord the same amount. Just like you can have, you know, 4 or 5 different English 100s, and every single one, you know, is a different group of students.
Totally.
I think, yeah, right. You'll find that a lot of students, you know, some of them are very, you know, active online and on Discord, and some are kind of still learning some of these, you know, third space platforms and maybe won't use it as much. For the students that are very active on Discord already, I would say it's a lot of class discussion, and it's a lot of, you know, relational sharing, you know, just kind of general conversation. For students that aren't as used to Discord or, you know, software like that, they seem to primarily use it for class discussion about assignments, or to work with each other on assignment, or remind each other about something that's coming up.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
So Megen, you're sharing specifically about Discord. Let's broaden a little bit. I'm using Pronto, which is another kind of chat forum platform communication tool. It's integrated into Canvas. But I'm teaching a class on campus right now, and I'm reminded of the good old, just like, you know, plaza outside the room where students congregate before I get there. And, you know, because nobody else is on campus really, I get the classroom kind of to myself. So I'm getting in there a half hour early. Students are showing up, we're just chatting. So there's a lot of that same kind of informal, you know, just community oriented conversation we're having. So John and Shelli, what are the third spaces that you're either seeing right now or really looking forward to getting back to when you get back to the campus? What are you thinking about in terms of open shared spaces where we can have these kind of interactions with students?
I'm going to defer to Shelli because I got zippo zero zilch in that other than just doing optional Zoom sessions.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that in a second then, John, if you want to defer, but I want to come back to the optional Zoom session.
Well,
You want
I'm
me- Yeah.
looking into using Pronto because I know I've heard a lot of things about it. I just haven't started yet. But next semester, I have classes in like every single possible version, from like 50% synchronous hybrid to 75% synchronous hybrid, 10-week, 8-week asynchronous to on campus. Like I have every version.
Nice.
I have like a fully synchronous class that we're only meeting like one of the days, like in Zoom, and the other day I want to use like Pronto as our like connecting piece and just sort of have students working on the class, like everyone at the same time, but having like Pronto as that space of sort of connecting and seeing how that works.
Cool.
So I don't know.
Okay, good. So thinking of Pronto, what else though have you used in the past, or that's not maybe a digital platform? Hi, Daniel. Does anything come to mind, Shelli, like a non-digital platform space like Discord or Pronto, something maybe a little more analog or a little more traditional? Office hours, I think, counts as a third space, to tell you the truth. I even think some things we do in the classroom, like conferences that interrupt the normal instruction, the sort of assessed, it's just an open space where we can get a pulse check, right? Are there things like that you do or think of, just as we kind of set the table?
Well, I mean, those are like things that I would be involved with. I know that with on-ground classes, my students get very comfortable with one another and share their phone numbers, and so they're constantly texting each other.
Yeah.
And when someone doesn't come to class, we're getting like updates from that person during class time. Like they're still trying to be a part of the classroom by texting whoever's there.
Yeah.
So they create entirely like private spaces for that, which I like them to have. So
Yeah, that makes me think of like the syllabus move we sometimes make, where there's a blank space where it says find 3 names and get their contact info, and then that creates like a potential study group or just a way to connect. Yeah. So what about these office hour or these Zoom optional hours, John? How's that going, and what are you doing?
So at the beginning of the semester, so I'm teaching all asynchronous classes right now. And then next semester, I'm a little bit like Shelli. I've got like this mix of, I've got one fully on ground, 2 hybrids, and then one fully online asynchronous. So I don't have any Zoom, any online where students are committed to be, together on Zoom.
Yeah.
So this semester, like the first 2 weeks, I was just barraging the students. Okay, whatever, I set up all these times, like in the first week, like, okay, I'll be available here, chime in, let's meet, this is an optional Zoom session, this is an orientation. So I started pitching the orientation, and I didn't require it because I can't, but I highly encouraged it.
Yeah.
And for all my classes, like all over the place. And then I thought I'm going to start there and just see like where people populate the schedule, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah.
And I got, a modest response. Let me just say that. And then that led to classes kind of meeting, identifying certain times when people were willing to meet. And really what's happened is so what it's all come down to is I have my World Lit students. I have this cadre of them, like about 7 of them, that meet every Wednesday night. And then I set up a different time on Thursday morning because I thought, okay, these students, only be able to meet on night. And then I wanted to have like a daytime thing in case anybody, well, it's the same group that meets on Thursday at 11, there. And it's hilarious because I prepared like these, I usually advertise on my weekly overview, like, okay, we're going to talk about this, and so I've got like, a little bit of an agenda. I like to keep it flexible. Sometimes I just like to talk, and which is fine. But then it's kind of like if I've gone through my agenda on Wednesday night, I'm like, okay, well, what am I doing tomorrow, guys? It was like, and usually we figure it out. Like sometimes it's just chat time or whatever. That's been great. Like everybody kind of realizes the value of that and they seem to really enjoy it. I have that for my humanities class too, but it's only 3 students that meet once a week. And I've had a couple pop in and out, but not too often. My 100 classes, I had 1 student who was committed to meeting every week, and then who was this great student, and then had to drop because of family issues. So getting the 100 students has been more of a challenge, I found. I mean, it might be because they're younger or new to college.
Yeah.
I do find that the students that like to meet for the lit class, so it's a 200 level lit class. So their students, they're sophomore level. They tend to be, they're probably the older students in the class. And so getting the new students, the 100 students, maybe the younger students, just getting more people on board is the challenge. I do extra credit, like, hey, if you show up, for your first time, you get extra credit, all that kind of stuff. And it's just a lot of beating the bushes. And it to be honest with you, I mean, I'm not crazy about online instruction personally. It's not my modality that I work well with.
Sure.
So I thrive off those Zoom moments. Like,
Sure.
I get contact with students,
Right.
It's so nice.
Totally.
Because otherwise I just feel like I'm in this void, kind of like, okay, we're sending stuff back and forth to each other. There's all these communications I'm sending out, but it's like, yelling into a well and not hearing an echo come back.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my goodness. So
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm interested in these social media platforms, third party. I have tons of questions about them.
Cool.
About how they're running and lots of anxiety and concerns, but that's just me and technology,
Sure.
So anyway, I'll just stop there and just say that the Zoom things are great for the people who show up. The problem is that most students are not showing up for them.
Right. Well, and I think, yeah. And I think
I just don't know what to do about that.
Right. I think we'll talk about this because I think that's true also of Pronto and Discord. I don't know that any of us are getting 100% like even not even just participation, but like signing up for it and logging in. I'd be interested to hear from Megan and Daniel. I know you use Discord too, so I think you do anyway. Is that yes?
Me, I find it so much work. I've kind of stopped. I find it because my thing is I like, if I'm going to add something extra, I like it to be at least semi-synchronous, and Discord just feels so asynchronous that it just feels like it's another canvas that I have to deal with. So I've sort of ignored it for that reason.
Got it. Yeah. So let's get into that. I just want to respond to you, John. I've taught asynchronous classes with Zoom meetings in them for since I started teaching online. So more than 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it is. And I want to tell you, the most I've ever had to come to one of those meetings is 19, almost the whole class, just 6 missing. But an average was probably more like 9 to 11. So about half the class. Since the pandemic, teaching exactly the same class, I've had 3.
Wow.
And so I don't know that it's newer students. I don't know even if it's because I'm doing this in 100 and 202. I kind of think it's just this season. we are Zoom burnt out. And so
Mhm.
that as an option for meeting and communicating, and it used to be exciting. Like you said, like when it was before the Zooms were popular, it was like we were all screaming into a void or into a well, and then suddenly we can hear and see each other. It was a magical thing. I think now it's like another Zoom, So that might.
I'll tell you that some students talk about they've taken asynchronous class specifically so they don't have to do Zoom.
Exactly.
If they see anything about Zoom, they sort of like send an email and they're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's optional and all of that. But so like some of the pushback is like, no, I chose this class because I don't want to get on Zoom.
Yep.
Because I had a lot of students like participate beforehand as well.
Yep. And I think before the pandemic, it was like, I didn't even know online synchronous was an option. So the fact that you're offering it in an asynchronous class seems like a cool experience I want to try. Now that they all know what it is, they're like, I don't want anything to do with that. But this is why I think, just to Daniel's point, a third space that is asynchronous might be the answer, not to every class, right? But maybe to these asynchronous classes as a site of community building. But we want to talk about the sort of the management of it too. Let's just kind of just nudge these affordances just a little bit farther. One other thing that I'm hearing us talk about is kind of how do we structure these third spaces and how do we kind of integrate them into our courses? I think I've seen course design where it's like, here's the third space, go there if you want to, and that's it. Like it's just mentioned and maybe they do or maybe they don't. All the way to where, and this is more of my technique, like I'm actually assigning work to be done in Pronto, right? So it's like an early direct message, hi to me, like as a first part of orientation, so they know what Pronto is, to like getting close to a research project where they're in there asking questions and answering each other's questions, and it's graded, like it's worth points, so they're sort of meant to go in there and do it. So Megan, how are you introducing Discord and sort of integrating into this semester, and we can kind of open this up to what other people think too.
Yeah, I would say I do something very similar to what you're doing, Curry. Before the semester even starts, when I start sending out, those pre-semester emails like, hey, this is who I am and wanted to introduce you to the course, one of the very first things that I ask my students to do is to download Discord, or if they don't want to download it, you can also just use Discord as a website and log in that way. It's very cool. Or you could have it as a phone app, or you could have all three. But I ask them to create an account and to go on and just post saying hi so that they get used to it. And then something I also do is every time I send an email, every time I have a class or make, a weekly overview video, I encourage them to chat with me and each other on Discord. So I'm mentioning it all the time. And what it's doing is they're like, oh, I could email, other students or her, or I could just, go onto Discord and send a message right now. And something that's really nice about using Discord to, communicate with each other or with me, is it's not really formal, It's the posts are editable. You can delete them. You can edit them after if there's like a typo. It's like direct messaging. It's immediate. They don't have to wait. They've sent the message, and whenever I get to Discord or another student gets to Discord, they'll see it and be able to respond right away. So some people, I think, prioritize the formality of an email, and they really like keeping that sort of formal correspondence, that formal communication. Others, I think, maybe more like Curry, probably a lot of us, me, I value just the student being able to, ask the question that they have. I don't care about all the bells and whistles that, go into writing an email a nice way. So actually on that Google Doc, if you scroll down to, I think it's page, how come page numbers don't show up?
I should have put page numbers on this.
No, it's totally me. For some reason, my
I'm
computer
gonna do that real
doesn't
quick.
tell me what page. It's on 5. There we go. So you'll notice that I have a direct message going with a student. And in this direct message, she actually, a lot of students do this where they're like, hey, I need, help on this aspect of my paper. and they send me a direct message, and I'm like, cool, either let's work on this when I have a little bit of time in a few hours, or if I'm free at the moment, I'll be like, yeah, let's work on it together now. And so we started, text talking, like direct messaging each other about her paper. And if you scroll down once more to page 6, you'll see that after a while, she was like, hey, can we, and this was actually a different paper, but she was asking if we could have a phone call. And you can use Discord to do video calls, to do phone calls. And so we went from a direct message immediately into I think we had a video call at first, and then it was a normal phone call where she kind of showed me her paper, and then she had to get up for a while. I found out through that discussion that she had a cold, so I was able to link her to the health services just right then and there in the direct message. And so, really just kind of encouraging them like, hey, this is a non-formal space. You don't have to worry about, the particular wording of an email and, all the kind of formality that comes with it. Just message me and let me know, how you're doing. And since I encourage them so often, and I start encouraging at the beginning of the semester, it's been kind of this safe space where students don't have to worry about me looking at their grammar, their spelling.
Yeah.
They can just communicate with me right then and there.
Yeah. So the student is saying, should I call you now? And it's a U, a letter U. It's not a Y-O-U, right? And I think that's just part of what the medium is, right? This is an ongoing conversation. It's so to message you brand new today is not to say, hello, Professor O'Donnell. I don't need to start something new. It's already going, right? So I can say, when's this due? And it fits. It's part of this conversation, right? And yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sorry, I should have my little hand thing here. I don't know where it went, but so, okay, one of the things that terrifies me about this is being messaged to death on my phone and not being able to get away from work. I mean, I think that's been kind of an issue with me with online in general, and especially during the pandemic, because I'm not going to an office, or I don't go to campus or whatever. So it's like there's no getting away from work. And I just feel so, and I'm just sharing with you because these are my concerns. I'm fearing like this tidal wave of stuff coming my way, and as it is, and this is part of the nature of how I'm teaching, I have all these low stakes assignments to kind of scaffold, and so I'm inundated. I mean, keeping up with all that stuff is supremely labor intense. And now I'm looking at this whole tidal wave of these communications coming my way. And that might be just my fear and misconception, but so Megen, I just wanted to ask you, how many messages are you getting a day? Like, and yeah, how is that working out for you?
Well, so funny thing about that. I'm finding students are using Discord. I've been using Discord ever since the start of the pandemic, when we did that spring break and shift afterwards. I'm like, oh no, I was really worried about that network, and students kind of falling away from the classes. So I was like, hey, Discord. And it really hasn't been until this semester that students have started to really be using it a lot. And to be completely honest with you, there are some days where I might get, get messages from 8 different students, 9 different students. I could get, and there's some days where maybe I'll get, 1 or 2 or 3. But the thing is that there are some options. So the first is that on Discord, there is, if you want to, you can create, which screen cap is it? I'm so sorry that they're not as well organized as I'd hope they'd be. It's on page 4. There's the screen cap where it says community guidelines, FAQs, and tips. And so what you can do to establish those boundaries is you can create a page and set the page to be read only or locked, or channel rather, and kind of say, hey, these are the times I'm going to be on Discord. So if you know, you're going to be sending me a message or leaving something for me to look at, know that these are the hours I'll be on and checking. So you can set those boundaries that way, and then also remind them, but the rest of the time, you know, you can talk with each other in this space, and hey, somebody might have an answer to the question that you have, and you know, it's a nice way to check in with each other first. The other thing is that what I usually do on my phone, since I have Discord on my phone as well as my computer, is I actually turn the notifications off so I don't get it pinging me on the phone all the time. And when it's kind of whenever I want to check it on my phone, I will. So I only have the notifications on for when I'm sitting at my computer. But the students also know, because I'm pretty upfront with them, like, hey, I won't always be able to look at your messages, you know, over the weekend. I'm probably going to go on a hike, get some sunlight, you know. So just kind of whenever I'm sitting at my desk, you know, I'll be able to check. So there are ways to, you know, set those boundaries, and, you know, you definitely don't have to have it on your phone as well as, you know, your computer or your laptop. So yeah.
I appreciate that. I like this kind of the enforcer of fun here. And I was going to ask you, you know, in creating sort of this non-college space, is there a danger of what goes on there and you know, inappropriate communication, that kind of thing? And are you responsible for that? So that would be one question, is are you responsible for it? And then two, you know, how that gets managed. So it does look like you've kind of found ways for the students to kind of shepherd this thing among themselves. So I'm thinking, to me, that the real value here is the students' capacity to communicate with each other, right? You know, get that really cool space where they can hang out and talk with each other and that kind of thing. But I'm also seeing the red flags go up, like, okay, you know, what can happen in this space? And so
Absolutely.
yeah, so are you I would imagine that you're responsible in a way for setting up this third space, and then how you manage that, like, you know, with students, the nature of their communication with each other.
Yeah. Can we so I want to get to that, John, because I think that gets us to not just, it's really interesting, right? Because we have this sort of let's decenter the classroom, let's empower the student with agency, and then when we have these wide open spaces, we respond to them with all kinds of controlling mechanisms, like don't do it, don't do this. So but I think your question about just the labor, I think, is a good one, just to follow just a little bit more, and we can loop, if you don't mind, we can loop back to the red flags, because Daniel mentioned it earlier too. I just want to share real quickly. I don't know that I get more student messaging through Pronto than I do through email. I think it's a similar volume, because I think it's that same ratio of students who are going to ask the question. But what's neat about these third spaces like Pronto or Discord is, if a student direct messages me and it's a good question, one that I know other students will have, I immediately say, here's the answer. And if this helped you, would you mind copying and pasting this in the general forum? So that the student that never is going to email me or direct message me gets to see, oh, this was the question asked, this is the answer that was provided, which I think is something that email just doesn't afford, and it's a pretty cool benefit. But I want to, but and I'm with Megan too, turn the notifications off, because then it doesn't bother you. Was that part of the problem, Daniel? You're just getting pinged all the time, or was it just knowing that Discord was there and you need to go check it that made it laborious?
I think for me, mostly it's the lack of engagement in Discord, but I think that's a unique problem to me in that I've not done completely asynchronous. So I always have one synchronous session at least. And therefore having the Discord feels useful for these reasons, that students can communicate more quickly sometimes. And it worked well early on in the pandemic with some of my like literature courses that had been on ground and then ended up online. And there was a lot of like, even during Zoom meetings, chat on Discord at the same time. But I think having the synchronous meeting always like the Discord feels kind of cobwebby, and then I feel like, well, I have to set up something specific scaffolded there to get them doing something there, but I
Yeah.
really don't. And so because I'm already doing stuff in Zoom. So I think that's why I've not wanted to deal with it, because we already have like Zoom chat is what I'm using for that. The problem is Zoom chat is ephemeral. And it like sending them the chat log is like looking at some sort of 1992 WordPad thing. So
Can you talk, because I was hoping that we would talk about Zoom's chat as a third space, and it's an interesting one, right? Because it's a space that's happening while instruction is happening or some kind of scaffolded activity is happening, but it affords such cool interactions with students and teachers. And Daniel, I've observed your class a couple of times, and your Zoom chats are always amazing. Do you want to just share a little more, or can we go a little farther with that, just from your experience using Zoom's chat?
cool, yeah. So and I've actually, so one answer to that is throughout my classes, there's almost always a question for students to be answering in Zoom chat while I'm speaking, and or just a time where that's happening. So for instance, yesterday in my literature class, we were doing Walt Whitman, and I had them all choose their favorite Whitman passage. And then what we did was I had a Padlet full of questions that they had to answer in Zoom chat and talk to each other about that for about 30 minutes. And while everyone was just answering stuff in Zoom chat and responding to each other, I was going down the Zoom list and having every person verbally speak their Whitman passage that they were interested in. So there was both, and then people were commenting on it in chat and answering the questions. So there's always something like that going on. One thing this semester that I found is there's been a hesitance with Zoom chat in terms of, I don't want to be the first person to put something in Zoom chat. So I've kind of moved, I use it for smaller things and easier questions, like at the beginning, just like what was an interesting quote or word or this or that. But I've moved, I had completely moved away from Google Docs for a while, and now I'm back. So I'm mostly using Google Docs now, where I set up a chart and have the question so they can see each other typing, because that facilitates it a lot easier.
Got it. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So John, I just, so let me kind of back up a second. I want to be mindful. I really want to build in some work time. I love that we're having this amazing, rich conversation, but I'm finding it so important, especially in this season we're in, to actually pause, do some work, and then we'll have time to come back together. So I think the red flags conversation, we could pick that up maybe towards the end. But John, I'm thinking of getting back into the physical classroom, but having this kind of option, the chat option, where we can all see it together, right? Because it just, like what Daniel's saying, it allows folks to just throw something on the wall, and it lets me look at it and then say it out loud or call it into the discussion. Whiteboards probably work a little like this, but whiteboards are a little, we've got to do a lot of physical work to get up and in the space, and right, having Pronto open on the overhead projector while we're talking and folks just sort of add things, that's, I'm excited to try that, right? Yeah, I don't know. Okay. So any final thoughts, like just like a question we need to ask or something we need to share before we do a little bit of work?
So can I just ask about doing Pronto versus Discord? So I wanted to ask Megan, why do you choose Discord as opposed to Pronto?
I like Discord because it's something outside of Canvas. I've found that a lot of our students already have Discord accounts. They use it. It used to originally just, be for gaming, but now there's Discords for arts and crafts, clubs, hobbies, you name it. It's a really, really popular peer-to-peer sharing network, I think is the formal term for it. And it was something that I was already using too and used to. So I figured, like, hey, if a lot of my students are using this, I'm using this. It's kind of, a natural space to create. And for the most part, that's been my experience with it, is by and large, I would say overall, with all the students I've had on Discord for the past 3 semesters, probably 65% of them already had Discord accounts, if not more. And so I like it because, again, it's more relaxed in that sense, right? They don't feel like they're, using a school institutionalized, third space. It's a space that they're already in, that they're already used to. They, a lot of them already know how to use. And so I used it for that kind of organic nature and that hope of strengthening that, kind of network and making sure students still feel connected. And the interesting thing, I won't take too long to add this in, but I just want to chime in as a detail. I will have students that, due to like family things or life things, maybe miss like a handful of classes, but they're still in the Discord space, still talking with each other, still, yeah. And
Right.
it's awesome. It's been one of the best things, in my opinion, about using Discord.
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right. So so for us who are here, and then for anyone watching this recording or listening to the recording later, this Google Doc that we've set up, I have tables set up. So here I'll actually share my screen just to kind of demonstrate. So if you open up the little menu on the left-hand side, this makes this easier to navigate. And you'll see at the bottom is just this repetition of explore your third space tables. All of them except for the first one are blank. So when you find one, if you just want to click in this little underline space, type your name, that will let you dib that table. So that's your workspace. And then I've organized the table underneath this question that we're really exploring right now. So how might open spaces encourage your students to lead, self-advocate, and belong within a community of readers and writers? I think we've explored some of that a little further than maybe others, but definitely let's let our imaginations kind of go to all those different places. And then there's just three open spaces to start brainstorming. So the first one is brainstorm any third spaces and the tools that afford open dynamic communication. So I've listed Pronto, SpeedGrader comments are kind of a cool third space. Canvas, like traditional email, office hours, the front door in front of my classroom. So I can brainstorm all those third spaces that I'm going to interact with next semester. But then there's some specific tools or sort of affordances for each of those that I might kind of drill into. So that's something that we can spend a little time on. Another open space here is thinking of a particular class you're going to teach next semester. So John, you mentioned humanities or literature. What might that particular class need in terms of how you structure this third space into it, right? So can you schedule a series of events that invite and sustain communication in a particular third space? Again, that's just an option. It's not like we have to fill in any of these boxes. It's kind of wherever we're at right now. And then on the right-hand side, I've attempted to create a bit of a margin where anything that's come up as you're sort of engaging with this, you have space to offer that. So I have some red flag stuff that I put here, John. So when inappropriate posts or microaggressions emerge, what can I do to intentionally and positive, how can I plan for intentional positive action to discuss those things? And so I'm thinking about that. And when I get into this work, I want to sort of expand on that a little more. Or also assigning points. Does that make sense? So that's something I'm interrogating and sort of analyzing. Okay, so does that make sense? Any questions about that? Sort of pick your table, find an open space. John dibbed this one. Megan, good, everybody's dibbed. And then we're gonna spend about, let's spend 15 minutes. And if we want more time, I'll add another 5 minutes so we can go up to 20 minutes. I'm gonna pause the recording and then we'll pick it up for a final open discussion. All right, so we just took about 15 minutes or so to do some work. I'm just gonna beat a dead horse really quickly. If you are listening or watching later, I would really highly recommend pause the podcast or the video, open your voice memo app, yell out the cool ideas you are thinking of right now. There's Google Doc space for you and we want you to contribute. So I'm just gonna say that. There's lots of cool stuff that I'm seeing that we in the space here right now are sharing. So thinking of text messaging, just traditional text messaging as a third space. Daniel, I see you thinking of perusal as a really interesting third space. But I wanna honor, John, the question you asked earlier about red flags, and I wanna start there. And I'll just frame it as this. I think one thing I'm really grappling with and the work that I've done with equity-minded teaching is just coming to the realization that if we create open space, we allow the status quo to occupy that space. And so students will bring the ideologies, the language that they bring. And so it's important for us, you know, as teachers doing equity-minded work, to be ready to disrupt that status quo, right? Because not only does it perpetuate racism, but and because it does, it can be very harmful. So so I have, you know, this just happened in my class. It was an in-person class, and I asked folks, whatever we were doing that day, just get into Pronto, just start sharing some stuff. It started off really focused on an assignment we were working on. It then turned into everybody sharing about their pets. So we got pictures of parrots and dogs and cats and fish and all kinds, which was great. It was awesome. It's fun. And then I had a student, and I didn't catch this in the moment because I'm teaching and I'm walking around. I had a student just sharing some like crude, like frat boy humor stuff. Nothing overly obscene, but just like totally inappropriate, and getting a snicker from maybe a person in the room. And no one was responding to it in Pronto. And I didn't realize this till the next day when I went through and was looking at it. And so my response to that was I wasn't going to delete it. My first move was to message that student and just tell him, like, you know, this was a really cool opportunity to share some things about this assignment. And here's the things I know you're doing in your assignment, and your classmates would really benefit from that. Like, really called him into like, this would be awesome to share. And then I said, you know, and these posts that you offered, I think are pretty disruptive, and I would like you to delete them, or I'd like to have a conversation with you in the class about them, right? Like, and I wasn't going to put him on the spot and shame him, but I just wanted to have a conversation about language and expression and what that meant in our community. He ended up taking it down, and he ended up adding some, you know, relevant posts that was more appropriate to what we were doing. So that's one approach. Daniel, I really like your comment. I just scanned it. That there's a problem with these platforms in that they weren't in their initial design thinking about equity. And so could I ask you to could you elaborate on that a little bit, and we can then follow the conversation where it goes?
Yeah, I mean, part of that is just that fundamentally all of these, I'm thinking especially of Twitch, but even Discord and a lot of these other spaces, they're designed with the idea that democracy is just everyone being able to shout at the same time. Yeah. And that you can just sort of ignore what you don't like. Or like the thing I've really liked in Twitch is that, and because I start using Twitch late in the semester, I know what students I can very much trust to make moderators, and then that sort of, then they are there in that space, and they feel super special, and so it's good. It makes them happy too. Oh. And especially because Twitch is interesting because it gets students up front and center with that idea of technologies, because then anyone can jump in. The fun thing is one of my friends that teaches the University of Redlands always pops in, so they get him, but then other random people start spamming. So, and that's what those spaces often are, which is why things like Discord are good, because you can sort of control it in the same way. But all of these, even Zoom, I mean, because John was asking that, when John asked that question about like, what do you do with, I mean, I've had more of those sorts of problems on Zoom in chat than I have had like in Twitch and things like that. Yeah. And it's just because of the idea that it's just sort of a neutral, it's an AOL instant message box, and anyone could pop whatever in there, and there's no sort of mechanism or understanding. But part of my thinking on that was like, that's what educational institutions have been. You just sort of, and the teacher is supposed to be there to design that experience, and it's up to them to make sure there's an equitable experience. Yeah. And now what a lot of places are reckoning with is, no, at an institutional level, there has to be ways that is built in. And I just think that sort of idea of, well, what this interrogation of what is democracy on these platforms needs to lead the conversation on how they can also be teaching spaces. That democracy just doesn't mean everyone's shouting and putting whatever they want, and that's kind of what they are. But in that, it's difficult to think like that's an entire philosophical conversation about what a chat box is. I think too, and how you formulate that and what material is built into that, that is easier in a traditional classroom because it's so much focused on the rules that are set up in that space versus the rules that our students feel they know about these spaces already that we're telling them to enter into.
Exactly. That's a good point. Yeah. Let's open that up. Like Shelli, John, Megan, what are you thinking about? Just in response to students, that democratized space, but then what Daniel says, we need to instruct in that space too. We need to structure that space, curate that space.
Well, one thing for me, like a reason I don't use like outside third spaces when teaching online is because I mean, students are like, they're tired of Zoom. They're like overwhelmed with technology. And I even had this experience before like COVID, the pandemic and everything. Like there's this expectation of technology connected to education that students just burning out on it. And so every additional thing that I bring in is a new like username and password and another place they have to save and go check, and it becomes like tedious and it doesn't add, right? It becomes just becoming this thing they have to do. And even if you set it up as like optional, then you get like some people participating, some not. And so like what is that space that's being created, and like people who really need to be there aren't there, like the ones who would really benefit from it. So it's become like very like isolating. And for those students who have more time or like things like this, where I have like a lot of students, right, working full-time jobs and parents and like all of the variety of things where they do not have another minute. And so they're not going to do anything optional because they just don't have the time for it. Which gets into like the whole grading connected to it. And so for me, it's also like going into those spaces and it's like another space for me to moderate. And I mean, I've been lucky, like I haven't had issues on my discussion boards or chats ever. Like I've been very, very lucky. Like students generally are very respectful to one another. But it's just right that like another space to like keep an eye on, and just becomes too much for me as well. Like I don't want to log into another, right? It's every single day, and I don't know.
Yeah. Megan, what are some of the like your reactions to that? Just the kind of moderating the space, empowering students to moderate the space, but then also what Shelli's raising. I mean, one of the things, Shelli, that you make me think about is how important notifications are and how cool they are, especially in Canvas. Like I just graded your thing and it can pop up on your phone. But then if students are taking 4 classes and getting all kinds of notifications from Canvas, either mine gets buried or they turn off notifications because they're bugged by them, right? So same with Pronto, like maybe a student asks an awesome question in the chat, but I'm not going there because it's too overwhelming to scroll through it all. But Megan, so just to loop back, so your moderation in that space, and also, have you heard students kind of talk about this, feeling overwhelmed by Discord?
Yeah, actually, well, not by Discord, funnily enough, which some of them, I guess, could be. I guess I'm going to work backwards a little bit, but in regards to that, creating another thing for them to do, another place for them to check, another sort of work environment, I don't treat my Discord like that. The way that I set up my class, they call them servers, but essentially my Discord is really in the spirit of a third space. So just like when we, like a student would come up to you if you're sitting at like one of those picnic benches outside of your classroom, or, if you happen to be in your classroom 20 minutes early and students come in and talk about their class stuff or like what they did over the weekend or sharing about their pets. So I kind of try to keep that spirit and not make it, we're going to do, actual class assignments in Discord, which I'm actually considering maybe doing now that I'm seeing so many students using it anyway. Yeah. So it's actually kind of almost the reverse to me, that I'm seeing more students using Discord, than not. And again, students, that just kind of disappear from other aspects of the class are still on Discord. So I'm starting to think like, well, maybe I could actually, incorporate some like group, activities and things there. But again, making it that optional environment. As far as, having it be tiring to like check and send reminders, I don't use Discord as the place to send important reminders. I will remind students. So typically, for an example, their essay was just due, and last night, by 11:59 p.m. And I send them the normal Canvas, Miracosta email, like, hey, remember that your essay's due, and I do that early on in the day. But what I did is I went and checked Canvas and noticed that, it's late in the semester and there were still like 8 students that hadn't turned it in, and it was like, an hour before it was due. So I went into Discord and I was like, you guys, and I did that at everybody, and it pings them, and I was like, turn in your paper. And I suddenly saw like, oh yeah, thanks. I almost completely forgot about that. Sure. So it really is just like this informal, space to, chat with each other, chat with me. Moderating, the really nice thing about Discord is that posts can be edited, they can be deleted, and I've found actually really very, very few like instances of students making microaggressions or inappropriate content. But the few times, I've kind of done a similar thing as you, Cray, where I'll message the student like, hey, maybe this wasn't quite, comfortable for everybody else in the class. Like it wasn't really on topic or whatever. And the few times I've done that, the students went in and edited the post on their own. Right. And I think sometimes in kind of like, a Zoom chat or any sort of a chat, sometimes people just kind of type and they don't think about what they're typing and posting. Right. Yeah. And so that's the benefit of something like Discord over, something where they can't go back and delete their posts or edit their posts is, those moments of, oh, I didn't mean to say that. Oops,
Right. Yeah, that's kind of the other side of it being informal is I am being informal in this space and maybe not thinking about audience. But that's cool. It can be edited.
That raises really interesting questions to me about the nature of writing in a chat space as opposed to being outside and just chatting. And because sometimes when I overhear my students' conversations when they're in those spaces, I'm just cringing, with the language that they use, this chick or, whatever. And that's probably coming from another woman, who's saying, well, this chick did whatever. And I'm like, and so I just, I don't need to be in their space out in, the table where they're smoking and drinking coffee and all the rest of that, it's, but if that's written up, all of a sudden it's interesting. It's like, okay, now it's more, maybe because of the nature of the written word, it's more concretized. Yeah. I think it becomes a learning moment. Like, it's a great opportunity to, okay, let's look at the language we're using here. But then on the other hand, then that leads to sort of like a type of policing as well. I mean, it's an interesting issue. I think that the difference between just a natural conversation, you could say the same thing and it flies, and maybe it shouldn't. Maybe we need to kind of, capture those things. But then when it's written, it has a different kind of presence. Yeah. Anyway, I think it's an interesting issue.
Totally. Well, and I think we know how important it is for our physical synchronous classroom discussions to have, to frame those with policies around kind of how this discussion will go, right? So civility, is a word that comes to mind. But more than that, right? That I think especially in our classes in humanities, right? Like what we do is talk about language and how language characterizes, the world and other people and casts realities, and we're always problematizing language. So I just think so. I think a lot of us are comfortable with Socratic discussions in which we say, hold on. Let's think about how we're using that phrase, or let's think about the implications of what we're talking about here in terms of race or sexism or whatever. So I think so I guess what I'm saying, John, what you're making me think about is how important it is, if we're going to really bring these third spaces into our classrooms, to be intentional and purposeful about how we kind of frame that, right? And what we're going to do when things like this come up, like let people know. I'm not going to delete it. Like, this is my policy. I'm not going to delete it. We're going to talk about it. So right. Stuff you put here is on the table, just like everything else in our classes.
Cool. I like that.
Yeah, getting students to really think through their choices too. You know, like we assign these papers where they go back and they revise. And so I think there's some power in, you know, even with a post, like think about, you know, your post. Do you want to revise that?
Yeah.
You know, and giving them the opportunity to be like, oh, I didn't mean to say it that way at all. You know, let me fix that. I'm so sorry, or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Megan, can I ask you a question? Because I asked, I told my 13-year-old about this meeting. And in part it came this way. She burst out of her room complaining about Discord. And I said, no, I go, you're kidding me, because I'm having a meeting about this tomorrow. And she goes, oh yeah, you know, it's so complicated, blah, 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 blah. And so not that you know, not that I'm giving credence to that, you know, it's just my daughter's response to something. But I did hear a buzz from someone else that may or may not be credible, but it did raise concerns for me about sort of the how complicated it is to set up Discord for neophytes to the technical social media world.
It can be complicated to set up your own server. So if you're creating your own like channel that, you know, for a specific purpose, although I've found ways to streamline it. If you are joining a server though, it's, if you have somebody explaining the process, giving you a quick tutorial, it's really easy. I set up like a little video tutorial that I send to my students at the beginning of the semester. It's step by step and they have a pretty easy time with it. So I think it's all about like the approach and like how it's, you know, I'm not just like throwing it at and saying like, hey, find this server and join it. I'm giving them like a detailed, like, here's how I'd like you to do this. And,
right. Yeah. So on the instructor end, do instructors and instructors are in the position of creating the server, is that correct?
Yes.
Or, okay, so then for us, it's going to be difficult. Just anticipating this.
It could definitely be. It's become fairly straightforward for me at this point. And so just as a quick call out to anybody listening to this podcast or watching this recording, or, you know, the people that are here now, if anybody is at all interested in creating a Discord for your classes next semester or any semester, let me know. Hit me up. O'Donnell@miracosta.edu. You know, I'm super, super happy to help you guys with that. I think it's fun. So, and it's not as complicated as I'm making it sound, I promise.
And I'll jump in and say the reason my literature one from a few semesters ago worked out so well is that, and why a lot of these have worked out well for me to some degree, is that they're often student led. So a student will say, hey, let's create a Discord. And that's how I started. And so for my literature one, for instance, that we first started, I was the main moderator, and she was like the secondary moderator, and she gave me a title. It's God King Professor was my title, and then she was sort of the second moderator, and so she was really the one that did everything, set it up, told students if they had any trouble with Discord to let her know, and that was the wonder of it. And then they could create their own channels. They were very nice and asked if they could have one channel where I wasn't in that channel. So they set up a sort of private channel without me, and then that student also, we learned throughout the semester, like frogs. So there's a channel called Frog Facts, and it's just a bunch of pictures of cool frogs that's in that one. But it worked. That one worked out so well, I think, because it wasn't just me that created it. And at that point, I had no idea what Discord was, and so that's how I learned. And it was helpful to have a student that taught me what was going on, and that was like the co-moderator with me for it.
I like that, you know,
yeah.
get a student to do the whole thing.
Well, absolutely, giving students those powers to moderate and like create channels, and yeah, absolutely.
Well, and we've talked about this in the department, that this can be how we structure the honors contracts around sort of empowering students as mentors for learning in the class, especially in English 100, right? So not that honor students must create a Discord channel, but if like, so Pronto's a little more straightforward to set up because it's integrated into Canvas. there's way less heavy lifting at the front. But I'm just thinking, Daniel, of your earlier comment about, empowering students as moderators. If that's part of the honors contract, that can be pretty cool, right? So, okay, well, we are at 2:01. I have a dentist appointment I have to go to, so I gotta bail. So I'm gonna stop the recording. If y'all want to hang out, you can. But I really want to thank you. Thank you, Megan, for helping to set this up. It was awesome to have your leadership in this space. And then thank you, John, Shelli, and Daniel for joining us. Great insights. And then, yeah, we look forward to other folks contributing later in the Google Docs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.